the social cost versus the social benefit, okay? So the way that we balance this is by trying to quantify the socially efficient amount. I want to tell you guys that this, for me, is the most interesting part of microeconomics. It's also the most difficult and the most nuanced to study and to prescribe policy for, because in terms of trying for us to figure out how much pollution society should have and get to that socially efficient quantity, one of the things that we need to know is what's it going to cost us to have it versus what's the benefit to have it. Why do you think that quantifying what it's going to cost us is difficult? Why is this one of the most tricky parts of microeconomics?
It might be difficult to capture the explicit and the implicit costs.
Yes, that is a very good point. It's hard to capture both explicit and implicit costs.
Everyone has different definitions of what the society should have.
Yeah. What all of us think is beneficial isn't true across the board. We have different opinions about that.
You have to go in between if it's equitable or efficient.
Right? Yeah, we have to think about, well, does this impact certain populations or regions of our country more than others? Also, what about the role internationally? We all live on planet Earth with all the 214 other countries that are out there, right? What we do matters and impacts other countries, and what they do matters and impacts our country, but we can't police all that. So that's another difficulty. The other big part of this, we don't know what the future cost is going to be. When we're trying to capture what these social costs are, a lot of them are in the future. We don't know what it's going to cost to clean up the mess from climate change or from the impact of microplastics in the ocean. We don't know. We just found out about microplastics a few years ago and the fact that they exist, right? So one of the other issues is some of this stuff is unknowable because it's yet to have taken place, okay? Some things we can know, but I just want you guys to think about this, because this is kind of my little public service announcement for, if you find this as fascinating as I do, it is a subcategory of something you can study in college and in graduate school, environmental economics. And there's a lot of math, but I'm just saying, it's a really cool area and one that has a lot of job opportunities. Okay. All right, so let's talk about marginal social cost and marginal social benefit, okay? And these are just definitions, and you should have prepared this for today. So I'm not gonna repeat the definition, but I did want to show you kind of graphically, because we're gonna look at a graph in just a second, but it doesn't illustrate it as well as I would like to. So we're going to call this marginal benefit. We're going to call this marginal cost, our normal sort of supply and demand, okay? If there are marginal social costs, okay, what that means is that we add some dollar value per unit of cost to the marginal cost curve, okay? So the marginal social cost curve is going to represent sort of the additional cost imposed by consuming one additional unit of the good, okay? So this is the marginal social cost curve, and this is kind of the distance between here and here is the additional social cost per unit at all of these different quantities, okay? So we start with the private marginal costs, and then we add on per unit the social costs. This is what it's gonna cost us in taxes or in higher insurance rates in the future or whatever because of the fact that we have to clean this mess up, or that we have to absorb absenteeism from the job because of these social costs, or whatever it might be, okay? And then the marginal social benefit curve is just exactly the opposite, right? So it is additional social benefits that you get per unit of the good, okay? And that's the additional, sort of the additional amount of benefit that society gets by consuming one more unit of the good. And where these two meet, the marginal social cost curve and the marginal social benefits curve, where those two intersect, that's the socially optimal quantity, okay? If we accounted for all the costs and benefits that the production and consumption of this good provided to society, that's the amount that would be consumed. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay, great. Now the hard part is that all of these costs and benefits are hard to account for. They're very hard to account for. All right, so this is sort of the same graph that I just put up on the whiteboard, but it's leaving out the private costs and benefits of the market, okay? Now the other thing that's important to keep in mind, again, pollution yields both costs and benefits. The socially optimal quantity is 3,000 units. So the socially optimal quantity is where the marginal social benefit is equal to the marginal social cost, and that should be the socially optimal price as well, okay? Why do you think that everything to the right, any quantity greater than 3,000 is dead weight loss?
Because the social cost is exceeding the benefits, so you shouldn't.
Right. Exactly so, right? So we never want to consume or produce above the place where costs and benefits are equal to one another. So these are imposing a loss on society, okay? And this is an interesting part of this, is like taking it and kind of thinking about it in a slightly different way. At 6,000, this is the quantity at which the marginal social benefit is equal to the price polluters are going to have to pay for each unit of pollution they emit. So it's a different kind of way of thinking about it. You guys are going to explore this a little bit more, by the way, in that hybrid activity. So you'll do a deeper dive. Okay. So it's an inefficiently high quantity because the marginal social cost greatly exceeds the marginal social benefit of zero. All right, I don't want to belabor this because I already kind of drew it up. What's going on? There we go. There we go. So yeah, you just kind of go down. Now, if we look at a graph where we may be only looking in the future at something that imposes social costs, or something that only imposes social benefits as a spillover effect. We'll get to that when we get to more on externalities. Then the socially optimal quantity, you don't have to worry about marginal social costs and benefit curves. You may only have one sometimes, okay? This is just introducing the concept of why we have this. Why is this not advancing? There we go. Okay. So you guys got introduced to this before. So far, when we've looked at perfect competition, we've only examined private costs and benefits, right? And we've said that those outcomes where quantity demanded equals quantity supplied is an efficient outcome, right? There are no mutually beneficial transactions kind of left out on the table. But what we're saying now is that, like, sometimes the decisions of buyers and sellers do affect people who are outside that decision-making capacity. They have not made the decision to consume or to produce a particular good. And you guys learned about that a little bit yesterday. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time talking about this. But I did want you guys to just look at the fact that there's no incentive, no market incentive, I should say, for firms to consider social costs. If left to their own devices, firms will produce to the point where marginal social benefit is equal to 0. Okay? They have an incentive to overproduce when there are negative externalities in place because they are concerned about their marginal costs. They are concerned about their own private costs, not the social costs. Okay? So the costs of pollution fall on those who have no say in the production process. And we're going to talk about this more when we get to tradable permits and the like kind of government solutions to some of these things. But there used to be a problem in pollution in the 1980s, 70s, and 80s called acid rain. Have any of you guys ever heard of that? Acid rain? Okay. The problem of acid rain was produced by manufacturers in the United States, primarily in the Rust Belt area. So like Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania. But the impact of acid rain was mostly felt by the East Coast and Canada. It had nothing to do with what was happening to power plants and other types of factories in the Rust Belt. So that's what they're talking about. Like the cost of that acid rain pollution was impacting farmers and residents and people far away from where the production was occurring, far away from where the jobs were for those things that provided that social benefit and all that, which is why there are government implications in all this. Okay, we're gonna revisit more on externalities next week. So we can stop there. We're gonna kind of switch gears and talk a little bit about some other types of market failure. One of them is called asymmetric information. When we were talking about perfect competition, we assumed something called perfect information. Perfect information. That was one of the lists of assumptions we made back when I gave you the notes on perfect competition in Unit 3. You probably don't remember it. That's okay. Perfect information means that the buyers know everything there is to know about the goods and that they're buying, and that the sellers know, right? So when there's asymmetric information, buyers and sellers don't have the same information. I used an example of smart diesel cars created by Volkswagen. Does that ring a bell? And we talked about the fact that they were fined because it was found out later on that the engineers at Volkswagen had tricked the car computers into saying that they were emitting a certain amount of greenhouse gases, but it was a lie. So people were buying Volkswagen cars being told that this car is going to emit less into the atmosphere. It's a cleaner car. And they bought it with that assumption of information. What they didn't know was that a select group of executives and engineers at Volkswagen back in Germany were lying. Okay, so that's what we mean when we're talking about asymmetric information, although there's other types as well. Okay. Another type of market failure is adverse selection. Adverse selection. And this is mostly a problem for sellers. So asymmetric information is usually a problem for buyers. Not always, but that's usually the case. Adverse selection is usually a problem for sellers. The best example of this is insurance. Okay? Do you guys know why there is a requirement that everybody have liability insurance for their automobiles? Because if the state didn't require everybody to have that kind of insurance, the people who'd buy it are the people who most likely to cause accidents or to have a bad driving record, whatever, okay? So adverse selection occurs when some customers are more costly than others, but sellers don't know that. It's why you have to be so honest when you guys probably haven't done this yet, but at some point in your life, you may get healthcare insurance through your job. And when you do that, you have to answer all these questions about your past medical history. And it's not because they don't want to give you coverage, it's because they want to know all the information so that they're not giving you a policy that is going to end up costing them a whole lot more money than if you had a different set of medical history. Okay? But the example they use, which is what I love, is that customers at all-you-can-eat buffets, right? I will say that this was something that bothered me when I was in college. You buy the meal plan. And the meal plan at my college, this is back in 1990, cost $3,500 a semester. So $7,000 for the year. It's a lot. I'm like, ain't no way I eat almost $4,000 worth of food in 4 months. No, right? Which is why I ended up leaving dorm life, because I'm like, I'll live in an apartment and I guarantee you I'll spend way, way less on food. So I don't eat that much. But they had to charge us that much because college dorm rooms or dorm meal programs are all you can eat buffets. Have you guys ever been on a college visit and gone through the line? You can have as much as you want. There's some things that are a la carte, right? But generally speaking, it's you get 14 meals a week or 21 meals a week or whatever. You can eat as much as you like that 21 times. And some people get a salad, a bowl of soup, and a little bit of hot tea or whatever. They're very inexpensive, right? And then, big rugby players or whatever go in there and eat 6,000 calories per meal per day. Okay. Moral hazard. Moral hazard is a tendency for those with insurance against some type of loss to take fewer precautions to avoid that loss. How many of you guys have insurance on your phone? Okay. I think I pay $6 a month so that if my phone gets destroyed because of something that I do or I lose it, I can replace it for a very small fee rather than spending another $1,000 on an iPhone, right? It is likely that you may be more careless with your belongings if you have insurance on it. Have you guys ever experienced that? Tell us your story, Kendall.
My dad has life insurance, and so my mom just she wants to get that money.
Okay. So she's go ahead and skydive.
Yeah.
Go ahead, let's do that scuba trip.
That's what I thought about. She always talks about his life insurance. So
Yeah. There was a long period of time when my dad was worth more dead than alive, and I remember my parents talking
They
about
always
that.
joke about it. That's
Yeah.
what I thought of.
Yeah. He didn't take a lot of risks, but we can't quantify the love you'd miss out on. Let's be real. Okay. So there are some things that can limit inefficiency of asymmetric information. Buyers and sellers can use signals to gain additional information, getting the Carfax type of thing. Healthcare insurance, making you fill out all those forms so that they have all the information on you. Having to do a credit check before you get an apartment, all that kind of stuff can help to eliminate the impact of asymmetric information. Okay, we still have quite a bit of time left. And I didn't want to get into the next module. So I'd like you to work with your table mate, and Andy, you can work with Christina